Well, good evening, everybody. I'm finally back to play another virtual concert for you. And I just got quite a bit of a little thrill because I was looking at my YouTube channel and noticed that the Christmas concert I played 3 weeks ago has now been viewed 54,000 times. I am completely blown away. That is amazing. Too bad I don't get paid for that, the way that people did in the old days when they sold records. Isn't that a shame? And with that, I welcome you all to tonight's concert, and the performance is called New Year, New Songs. I did the same thing around this time last year. Maybe I'll make it a tradition because usually in the wintertime I don't have as much work, and I can sit down and learn new songs to play for all of you, at least new old songs. That's kind of the idea behind tonight's concert. A number of them will be songs that, at the very least, I think I have not played in a very long time, or perhaps ever on one of my virtual concerts. And so to start tonight's performance, here's a song that dates all the way back to the year 1900, which I have played before, but not very often. This was a tune that the great Max Barath used in his shows for many years. I'm certainly living a ragtime life. I'm certainly living a ragtime life. Got a ragtime dog and a ragtime cat. A ragtime piano in my ragtime flat. I wear ragtime clothes from hat to shoes. I read a paper called the Ragtime News. I sleep in ragtime and I talk that way. Dress in ragtime and I rag all day. I've got ragtime troubles with my ragtime wife. I'm certainly living a ragtime life. Great tune. Well, I'm certainly happy to take requests tonight, as usual, but I have a number of things that I have planned ahead of time that I've practiced that I want to play for you. And we're going to do a couple of tunes now by Eubie Blake. And this next piece, I'm glad I thought about this. If you follow my YouTube channel, you might have noticed I posted just on a whim the other day a couple of really wonderful TV documentaries about ragtime music. And there's a scene in one of them where Eubie Blake plays this piece. And I was reminded just how good it is. This is supposedly one of the earliest ragtime compositions. I would have to double check, but I believe I read it dates back as far as the Chicago World's Fair of 1893. It's mentioned in the book They All Played Ragtime. And James P. Johnson also recorded his own version of this piece, which is quite different from the Eubie Blake version. But that's the one I'm going to play, is the Eubie Blake arrangement. And Eubie said that he learned it from an itinerant pianist when he was very young, named Jesse Pickett. Supposedly one of the composers of this tune was also an itinerant pianist called Jack the Bear. But this version, according to Eubie Blake, was by Jesse Pickett. And it's called The Dream, sometimes called The Dream Rag. Here we go. Thank you so much. The Dream, as played by Eubie Blake. Yeah, it's pretty neat, isn't it? Well, now let's do one of the Eubie Blake tunes that I haven't played very often. And this comes from Eubie and Noble Sissel's hit Broadway show, Shuffle Along, from 1921. One of the more politically incorrect tunes in my repertoire, but I really don't care. It's a great tune called If You've Never Been Vamped by a Brown-Skinned Gal, You've Never Been Vamped at All. And this is inspired a little bit by the James P. Johnson piano roll. Thank you so much. If you've never been vamped by a brown skin, you've never been vamped at all. Eubie Blake and Noble Sissel. Well, usually after I play about 3 tunes, I make an announcement that I do accept virtual tips for these concerts. All you have to do is send in a tip on PayPal or Venmo, and the information should be in the postings on all 3 websites, in the chat and so forth, both PayPal and Venmo. Pretty easy, and it's very helpful. Got a question here from Jonah. He says, when are you ever coming to New Orleans? I sure would love to, but I don't know anybody that's wanted to hire me. So, I get a lot of requests like that. People say, oh, are you coming to this state or this town? And I would love to do it, but it's all about who you know in this business, apparently, and who's got the money to make it happen, unfortunately. It's not as much about the music, I find, as I get older. The fun of learning this music when I was a teenager. Now, unfortunately, it's a whole lot of what I do is more about trying to make a career out of it. But, how neat. Charles says, I saw Eubie live at Earthquake Magoons in San Francisco. Now, let's see, what's next? Oh, I'm going to play a request. This came from my friend Dave Goodlaxon. He asked me to play an old-fashioned march. And everyone knows and loves the music of John Philip Sousa. The only one of the Sousa marches I've ever played, Stars and Stripes. but I do happen to have this piece under my fingers at the moment, so I thought I would play it for you. This is a march by a very prolific composer whose name was Harry J. Lincoln. And hopefully this doesn't fall off the piano. Harry Lincoln wrote tons of music, including rags, I think, I'm not sure. This piece was arranged and published by one of the other March Kings, E.T. Paul. Now, his music sold like hotcakes in the 1890s and the early 1900s. It was fairly easy to play, and he also had the greatest cover artwork of any music publisher in the history of American popular music. And so here from the year 1900, it looks like, is Midnight Fire Alarm, a descriptive march gallop by Harry J. Lincoln. Midnight Fire Alarm. Thank you so much. That's truly a non-syncopated march. I don't know whether you would consider that popular music or not, considering it's not syncopated and it's a march, which is a style of music that predates ragtime, at least in commercial published music form. I don't know. I think that is considered popular music. Really, anything that sells a bunch of copies. Well, doing pretty well on viewers tonight. Holy cow, almost 50 on Facebook and 130 on YouTube. Wowie zowie. I feel bad I haven't been able to do a virtual concert for several weeks. Incidentally, if you can't tell, my friend Chris Drury was here from Albuquerque yesterday, and he made this piano sound so much better. It was getting pretty pitiful, the tuning and several other things. He spent 8 hours working on my piano yesterday. Not only did he tune the whole thing 2 or 3 times, he took the bellows out and vacuumed it, and he turned some of the wire on the bass strings so they'd sound better, and he voiced the hammers, needled the felts, and oh my goodness, it's just beautiful. So I'm really going to try and take advantage of that tonight, thanks to Chris. Next up, here's a rag which I have played it before, but not very often, so it's kind of a new tune for my virtual concerts. A rag written in 1901 by a man named E. Harry Kelly, who lived in Kansas City, which was one of the biggest towns in the Midwest, and there was a lot of great music there in both the ragtime years and the early jazz age. This one dates back pretty far, but believe it or not, the tune was dedicated to Charles L. Johnson, who was already known as one of the great ragtime composers in this country. If you listen closely, I think it's the third part of the tune, you can hear a melody which became known quite a few years later as Old Man River. It's a very similar tune. Who knows where it came from? Again, the composer, E. Harry Kelly, and the rag, Peaceful Henry. Thank you so much. Peaceful Henry. I was wrong. It's the 4th section of that piece that quotes Old Man River. Or actually, it should be the other way around, because that song didn't come out until about, well, more than 25 years later. Next on my list is a rag that comes from the cradle of ragtime, Sedalia, Missouri, where Scott Joplin lived. There were a number of rags published in Sedalia, Missouri that were not written by Scott Joplin, of course. the great XL rag, which is a favorite of mine, and this piece. And I know nothing about the composer, except that he wrote a really good tune. It came out in 1902, and this was published by A.W. Perry and Sons Music Company. It was very unusual, just by coincidence, I suppose, that Sedalia, Missouri had two music publishers in the early 1900s, at least until John Stark moved to St. Louis. Perry had a music magazine that was sold all over the United States. It was quite successful, and A.W. Perry also published one of Joplin's pieces, 1904, The Favorite. However, as I said, this one is not by Joplin. This was composed by Charles E. Cohn in 1902. It's called How Reuben Does the Rag. Sedalia, Missouri. The authentic stuff. Thank you very much. How Reuben Does the Rag. In the early 1900s, a lot of popular music, including rags and marches, were associated with rube characters, meaning like country people or farmers and that kind of thing. That's probably where that title comes from. And it's called a march two-step, but the piece is very syncopated, so it is very much authentic ragtime. One of the things that occurred to me in searching around for new songs that I have not played on my virtual concerts is that I could go back to the CD I recorded with Johnny Maddox The two piano album we did at the time, I was 16 years old, and Johnny was in his early 80s. I wish that I could go back and do that somewhat differently because, well, you know, I've learned so much about playing the piano since I was 16 years old that I could do things different. But we did a lot of what you might call ragtime era pop songs or vaudeville songs. And one of the things that was difficult about doing that album was that Johnny picked so many songs that there wasn't enough time to do them all and do really good takes on them. They also put us in separate rooms with headphones on. I doubt Johnny had ever worn headphones in his whole life, and certainly trying to play the piano at the same time was not a good idea. But besides that, we did a lot of great tunes that I haven't played very many times in the years since. And incidentally, I'm completely sold out of that CD. So I'm sorry if you don't have it. I also cannot help you get it. But the first little medley that we recorded that I'm going to play for you now is a couple of Hawaiian songs from the Hawaiian craze during the ragtime era. This one, written and composed by Tom Armstrong, don't know who he was, came out in 1911. And here's the original sheet music cover for Rose of Honolulu, with a girl coming out of the top of a flower. But it has a great melody, and I'm going to play it for you now the way we did it on the CD, which is as a medley with another tune. I'll just throw in a couple of choruses of On the Beach at Waikiki. Rose of Honolulu and On the Beach at Waikiki. Rose of Honolulu. Thank you very much, folks. Well, rather than play just one pop song after another, I thought I would intersperse them with instrumentals. And mostly going to do instrumental rags tonight. And I have another one to play for you, which I have done it before, but not very many times. And this has absolutely become one of my very favorite pieces. In fact, I recorded it as a piano solo on the CD that I did with Domingo Mancuello. And this is a rag from 1903, I believe written in Chicago by a man named T.A. Dugan. Sounds a little bit like an Irish name, but it's very much a piece describing, how do I put it without sounding incorrect? It's describing the little dances of an African-American boy dancing to the music of that time, which is great. And this piece actually has a few descriptions on it. The blacks gathering at evening on the New Orleans levee, and then that's the introduction. And then when it goes into ragtime, it says, the pranks of Hap Little Mose. And that's the name of the piece, Hap Little Mose. Thank you so much. Hap Little Mose. I have to thank the ragtime pianist from the West Coast, Michael Chisholm, one of my good buddies, for introducing me to that piece. He played it so many times. I just had to have an original copy, and he helped me find one. And I liked it so much I put it in a picture frame here at my house. Well, next up, a couple more of those pop tunes, vaudeville songs that I was mentioning. Again, a few that I recorded with Johnny Maddox. We did a lot of medleys where we put two songs together just to make it longer. And so the first tune is called Huckleberry Finn. It was a great number from about 1917, written in part by Cliff Hess, I believe, recorded at the time by Van and Skink, Johnny's old friend Gus Van, the vaudevillian. We did it as a medley with this tune, which has a really terrific cover. The artwork is just really neat. It's called The Storybook Ball. You know, it might be worth looking at some of the words here and reading these to you. And Mother Goose's book up in the nursery, poor simple Simon said, I'm feeling sad. Said Peter Piper's daughter, so am I think we oughter try to think of something that will make us glad. So Smarty said, I'll give a party. And they called on the old woman in the shoe. The cat, she brought her fiddle, and she played high diddle diddle, and what happened then I'm going to tell you. Little Jackie Horner, eating pie up in the corner, stuck in his thumb, pulled out a plum. Little Missy Muffet, she was sitting on a tuffet, and she said, yum, yum, please give me some. Little Georgie Porgy with his pudding and pie kissed Mary quite contrary till he made her cry, and little couldn't find him, their tails behind him. Peter Pumpkin Eater had a wife and couldn't keep her at the ball in the hall. Humpty Dumpty met her, said, I'll bet that I'll get her, and I'll make her fall. That's not all. Old King Cole, that merry old soul, he fell for Mother Hubbard, blew his bankroll buying lollipops and pretties for the kiddies at the storybook ball. So here's Huckleberry Finn and At the Storybook Ball. you very much. I see someone mentioning in the chat there something about Ian Whitcomb. It's funny you mentioned Ian because I did later record Huckleberry Finn with Ian Whitcomb. He's one of the very few people that could really sing these types of old pop songs, old vaudeville songs, at least in more recent years. He was one of the best. Okay, well, now let's do another instrumental rag. And here's the original copy of it. It was later published with a picture of the composer on the cover, and that's usually the one you find, but this is the first edition of the wonderful Swanee Ripples. This piece was written by a composer named Walter Blofus, Walter E. Blofus, 1912. And it has a dedication to my esteemed friend Gene Biefeld, or Biefeld. We don't know who he was, but I recorded this piece at Johnny's request with the Peacherine Ragtime Orchestra, and I've hardly ever played it since, which is a shame because this is a really neat rag. The rags I've chosen tonight, I haven't played them very often, in part because they're hard to memorize and they're just one-of-a-kind pieces of music. There are a lot of rags like that are just totally unique in musical terms. XL rag is one of them, Lily rag is one of them, and Swanee Ripples is another. It's primarily the rhythm in the second section of the piece. It's very unusual, so listen closely. Swanee Ripples, a rag by Walter E. Blofus, according to this sheet music, arranged by Harry Thompson. Swanee Ripples. Swanee Ripples. Thank you very much, folks. Well, if you've never heard of Walter Bloffus, I'm not surprised, but I think he did gain a little bit of fame. I heard that he played on the NBC Breakfast Club radio show in the 1930s, and he also wrote a waltz that became quite an enormous hit, actually, when it came out in 1919, and I recorded this waltz with Johnny on that CD we did together. You might still be able to get the CD on digital downloads. I'm not 100% sure about that. And this real pretty tune is called Your Eyes Have Told Me So. The first time I ever heard this was the Buffalo Bills Barbershop Quartet singing it. And this copy, which came from Johnny's collection, is autographed by the composer Walter Bloffus. I have no idea where he found this, but I was thrilled to get it. It says, it's quite an interesting inscription, too. It says, to my dear friend and former piano teacher, I believe this is Maurice Rosenfeld, with compliments of the composer Walter E. Bloffus, December 11th, 1919. Here is Your Eyes Have Told Me So, complete with the verse, which has always kind of thrown me for a loop, because the verse is in 2/4 time, and the rest of the piece is in 3/4. Thank you very much. Your eyes have told me so. I'm sorry I'm sniffling. I have had 2 colds in a row. I really feel very good, but hard to get rid of that stuff, especially when you travel a lot. Let's do this one next. This is not a great sheet music cover, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. It was part of the times. This is a tune that I had almost forgotten about. It just occurred to me this week to play it, and I really love it. The date is 1927, but the melody of this song sounds almost exactly like a song that Shirley Temple sang in one of her movies. It was written for the movie Captain January, called At the Codfish Ball. I think that's my favorite Shirley Temple song. But anyhow, here from 1927 is When Erastus Plays His Old Kazoo. I haven't played this one in a long time, I bet 12 or 15 years. And it's a great tune, written by three guys, Sammy Fain, Sam Coslow, and Larry Spear. When Erastus plays his old kazoo. When Erastus plays his old kazoo. Thank you, folks. Well, it's 7 o'clock here in Durango, Colorado. So I'd like to remind you that if you're so inclined, I do accept virtual tips for these concerts. I think I've got over 200 viewers tonight. You know, every small bit helps. It helps me try and make a career out of this music, especially in the wintertime when I don't have as many gigs. And there's both PayPal and Venmo information in the postings, and I have a P.O. box on my website for checks as well if you don't trust PayPal. I don't blame you. You can get all my CDs directly from my own website, by the way. I suppose CD sales really have dropped in the last few years, but I put a lot of effort into the albums that I have produced. And I will not be making any more CDs unless I sell a few more of the several thousand that I still have in the closet. So you might check those out. My website has my middle initial in it. It's adamgswanson.com. Now, I have quite a bit of music left that I want to play for you tonight, but I'm happy to take some requests too. And I'll get to more requests here in the second half of the concert. So go ahead and send in some requests, and I'll see what I can do for you. Sometimes it takes a minute for the requests to come in on the chat, so while I wait on that, we're going to go down to New Orleans now, and I'd like to play for you a couple of tunes written by a legendary pianist. He was called the world's greatest single-handed entertainer. His name was Tony Jackson, and supposedly he was one of Jelly Roll Morton's biggest inspirations. Jelly Roll Morton was not a humble man, and he always said that Tony Jackson could always beat him in a piano contest. And so Tony wrote one song while he was still in New Orleans. Later on, he moved to Chicago. A lot of African Americans moved to Chicago to escape the South, I imagine, in the 1920s and 30s. And Tony Jackson was one of them. But while he was still in New Orleans, he wrote Pretty Baby, which became an international hit in 1916. And then after that, I'm going to play one for you that he probably wrote after he was in Chicago in 1917, which was a mild hit at the time. I think Marion Harris recorded it, and I have loved this song for years. It's called Some Sweet Day. So I make a little medley out of these two songs. And with Pretty Baby, I will play the original verse, which is not the one in the sheet music that was written by Egbert Van Alstyne when the tune was published. This is the original verse that was recorded by Glover Compton, another pianist who was a friend of Tony Jackson. So we'll do both Pretty Baby and Some Sweet Day. Thank you very much. The music of Tony Jackson. I have played those songs before, but not in quite a while, I don't think, at least on my virtual concerts. Tonight's concert is called New Year, New Songs. I hope you're all enjoying hearing a little bit of songs that you haven't heard before, maybe not in a long time. I appreciate you listening to the music of this era, which was now so long ago. What I'm going to do next is play another song for you, written by Tony Jackson, the New Orleans pianist who was called the world's greatest single-handed entertainer. I've always been fascinated by him. And he did have about, 8 or 10 tunes published. Someday it might be fun to play more of these for you. He wrote tunes like, I left you with the birds, the trees, and flowers, so please don't leave me in the ice and snow. Pretty baby, please don't leave me in the ice and snow. And I've got 'em, there ain't nothing to that. I've got 'em, and I'm telling you flat. You're only jealous of my great renown. Those are all pop tunes by Tony Jackson. Sadly, he died somewhat young. The year was 1921. And I'm going to play the last song that he had published for you. This is called I'm Certainly Gonna See About That. And tune had some mild success. My copy of the original sheet music has Margaret Young on the cover, the great vaudevillian. And I also have a record of this, sung by Sarah Martin, who was a popular blues singer of the period. But I'm not going to play it for you myself. I have an original piano roll of this song, believe it or not, but it's not hand played, so maybe it may seem a little lackluster to you, but I just thought it would be interesting. It'd be a song you've never heard. So here's I'm Certainly Gonna See About That on a supertone piano roll, which is just a prearranged roll, but at least you get to hear the song. And for those who may be new to my concerts, this is a 1913 Apollo player piano. And I'll just do my best to add a little bit of expression with the dynamic lever and the pedaling, which is most regular upright pianos don't have that. Regular 88 note upright pianos don't have that dynamic control. So we'll see what I can do. Here's I'm Certainly Gonna See About That. There it is. I'm certainly going to see about that. Well, that's it for the piano rolls today. Start sending in some requests, folks. I haven't seen too many. Maybe I need to go back and look at the chat here so I'm not missing anything. Just give me half a second. Thank you to Backseat Sauceman for subscribing on Twitch. Gladiolus rag, I don't know that by heart. Sponge is a great rag. I don't know that by heart either. Oh, I see a request here that would be kind of fun. I see a request for the naked dance. And that fits in perfectly since I was doing tunes by Tony Jackson. This is apparently a real thing that would happen in New Orleans in the early 1900s. Jelly Roll Morton and Tony Jackson would play for naked dances, which Jelly Roll said was considered high art in New Orleans at that time. This is more what Jelly Roll remembered as the way Tony Jackson would play for the naked dance. So here's an imitation of it. Glad I'm getting in a request there for you. The naked dance. Thank you so much. Well, I'm looking at YouTube now. I see a request for a beautiful rag. This might be a good idea. I don't play it that often, so I suppose it fits in for new songs. Tonight, at least, a concert of new old songs. And I like to play a slow one, so the YouTube handle is from HL. I don't know what that means. Someone let me know. This is one of Scott Joplin's most beautiful rags, written in tandem with Louis Chavan, one of the legendary ragtime piano players who sadly died before he had much music published or ever made any piano rolls or other recordings. But it's just absolutely gorgeous. So here's the Heliotrope Bouquet. Heliotrope Bouquet. Thank you so much. That's certainly one of the most gorgeous Joplin rags. I prefer it to Solace myself, just because I've heard Solace so many times, which was in the movie The Sting. Heliotrope Bouquet was in the movie The Sting 2, which I have never seen, but I've heard is terrible. That's all I know about it. Dave says, we don't know for sure who wrote a lot of that piece. That's not really true. If you have studied Joplin's music, it's pretty evident that Joplin wrote the last two parts and Louis Chavan wrote the first two parts. It's almost incontrovertible if you know Joplin's music style. The first two parts are just totally unique and really the only examples of we have of the way that Louis Chavan actually played. I got a request prior to tonight's concert. Actually, this goes back several weeks from my good friend Daryl Woodruff, who's one of my regular listeners. And he wants to hear a tune which I know I've played this a number of times, but I'm just going to throw it in for him tonight. And this was written by the great Lucky Roberts, who was a virtuoso ragtime pianist as well as a Broadway composer. He was quite a successful musician. And he wrote this in 1920. It's called Railroad Blues. I play it the way that he did on his player piano roll. Railroad Blues by Lucky Roberts for Daryl, finally. Thank you so much. Well, that goes out to Daryl. It's a great piece, isn't it? I have a wonderful memory of playing that tune over the phone for Trevor Tishner. And after I'd finished, Trevor says, he's got the job. Daryl has done something very interesting. Daryl has done a spreadsheet of all the tunes that I have played on my virtual concerts. And I asked him, well, because so many other people ask me and I don't have an answer anymore, I said, how many tunes do you think I know? And he even has checked on the spreadsheet which ones I use sheet music for and which ones are memorized. Daryl says I know 822 songs by heart. I don't know if that's quite right, but lately I've been guessing 700, so I imagine Daryl is right on track. I thought that was very interesting. Well, let's get back to new songs that I don't play very often. If you have listened to my concerts in the past, you may have heard me mention the songwriter Glenn Rowell, who was a big radio star in the 1920s and 30s, and later became a friend of Johnny Maddox. They did two piano work together. And I came up with a medley of songs that Glenn wrote in the early 1940s. This is the World War II years, so this is a little different. And I have probably played these for you before, but I don't do them very often. So here are some rare tunes, at the very least, written by Glenn Rowell in the early 1940s, at which time his radio partner was Gene Carroll. They were called Gene and Glenn. And it's 4 songs, actually, all from that period, from about 1940 through 1943, or thereabouts. The first one is called But You Do, written in tandem with the bandleader Frankie Masters. And then I'll do a tune called I Believed in a Dream, which Glenn wrote with the famous recording artist Von de Leith. And then the third one is one of Glenn's most beautiful tunes called Some of Your Sweetness Got Into My Heart, which was recorded by none other than Frank Sinatra in his very early days with Tommy Dorsey's orchestra. And then I'll end the medley with a very obscure tune, which is called In the Doorway Where We Used to Kiss Goodnight. As far as I know, the song was never published, but Glenn wrote it with the brilliant J. Fred Coots in the early 40s, and I have the manuscript which Johnny gave me. So here is a medley of songs, all written mostly by Glenn Rowell from the World War II years, early 40s. Thank you so much. The music of Glenn Rowell. I don't think I mentioned that his biggest hit, of course, was I Get the Blues When It Rains, but I've played that many times. It doesn't fit in for new old songs tonight. I want to mention that, unfortunately, I will not be able to do another virtual concert for about 3 weeks again. I'm missing 2 Sundays just because of my travel schedule. I am going to play at a relatively small music festival in Muscatine, Iowa. The Eagles and Ivories Festival. Jeff Barnhart has invited me to be artist in residence there for about a week. And unfortunately, I have to fly out next Sunday, and I don't fly back until the Sunday after that. And I just can't do a virtual concert on the same day that I have to fly. So the next one will not be until the last Sunday of the month, January 28th. But please write down the date, and since it's been a little bit more sporadic lately, maybe that'll help you all remember. I will send out reminders on Facebook as always. And this is so much fun. I love playing for you, especially when my piano sounds so great. It sounds like a grand piano again tonight, thanks to Chris. And I'm not sure what the theme for that concert will be, but I'm very much looking forward to playing for you all again on all 3 websites on January 28th. So remember that. And I think I've solved my streaming issue again. My Ethernet adapter quit working. And I tried multiple adapters and it wouldn't work. And today I discovered that I can use the Ethernet connection directly from my computer when it is plugged into my cell phone. So looks like everything's beautiful. I'm going to close tonight's concert with a piece that I haven't played very often. And this is one of the very few really great tunes I've ever learned completely by ear. This was recorded in 1929 by one of the great early jazz pianists, Alex Hill, and it's called Stompin' 'Em Down. Here we go. Stomping them down. Thank you so much, everybody. Well, that's exactly what that tune does. Stomping them down. Like I say, I picked that out by ear, but I think it's pretty close to the original Alex Hill record. And then, of course, in later years, Jeff Barnhart and Brian Holland, who are two great piano players, have made that almost like their theme song. I love it too. Thank you all so much for joining me tonight. It's been a lot of fun playing new songs for you. That's one of my favorite things to do. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if so, please consider leaving a little virtual tip. There's PayPal and Venmo, and I will be back 3 weeks from tonight, which means I'm missing 2 Sundays. The next date is January 28th. Can't wait to see you all then. Thanks so much for listening, and good night for now.